All right, Pat, here we are for yet another one. Season 5, Episode 7. I'm recording in the darkness today, as you can see, in order to mirror the darkness that this episode is foreshadowing. As Season 5, Episode 7, The Gift, referring to the fact that Tyrion Lannister is the gift being presented by Jorah Mormont, to Daenerys Targaryen. You got any thoughts on this before we get started?
Yo, listen, Dom, I think the Talking TV family that are listening to Talking Thrones probably think the gift is that the clams, cockles, and whatever line did not appear in
Still
this
hasn't
episode.
happened. It still hasn't
But
happened.
hey, that might mean that it taints the next episode,
Oh,
Hardhome. It
no.
might actually be part of that setup before the great battle. So
Oh,
I hope not. I don't really
no.
remember, but eventually that gift is coming straight to us.
Oh man, all of that and more on today's episode of Talking Thrones. Oh no. Hey Pat, you ever do that thing where you listen to a certain piece of music over and over and over and over again to the point where you could almost start to trick yourself into thinking that you're hearing it in different keys? You ever do that before? 'Cause I just did that with our intro. I don't know why. It's just a weird thing that I just noticed.
Man, I can't say that I have, but I have definitely fixated on a song before and really just repeated it and was able to get into like a story world and start developing a script and write things down. So, I think
So not what the showrunners have been doing this season.
yeah, not exactly what you're talking about. Our to basically acknowledge your joke. Yeah, I guess they didn't put their iPod on to listen to the songs.
No, they
But
didn't. They were too busy making guitar riffs of their own with Ramin Djawadi, the song composer. This is how you can tell I've
jeez.
been watching a little bit too much Critical Drinker recently, because I've just been going down a rabbit hole of his clips that he puts out where it just roasts the shit out of like everyone in Hollywood, and they're basically like do better. And one of the clips is little title George R. Martin finished the fucking Winds of Winter, and it's relatively amusing. But yeah, episode 7, The Gift. This is a big episode for a lot of different reasons. The episode before Hardhome, this Miguel Sapochnik's directorial debut. Miguel Sapochnik obviously being kind of, the new action go-to guy for the rest of the show. He directs next episode, Hardhome. He directs The Battle of the Bastards and the Winds of Winter, and then he obviously also directs The Long Night and The Bells for the final season. And all of his trademarks are immediately established here. The look of this episode is different, really, than any of the previous looks of really any episode of the show, and just the way that he directs his battle sequences. I love the crisp handheld motion. I love how the sequences that are set in the north, like you could really, really feel like the incoming tide of just winter, which obviously represents the incoming surge of death in this case. Also, another technical behind the scenes thing that I wanted to point out: this episode is actually shot by Snyder's DP from Snyder Cut, Fabian Wagner, which explains a lot. That guy, man, he knows how to use a camera. So obviously, you can tell that we are definitely getting more so into the sense of where, okay, this is no longer a show about long stewing character conflict. This is a show that's only going to be about build-ups to these huge, gigantic moments. And we're obviously getting that next episode with Hardhome. This is another setup episode. Certain characters finally, starting to see the consequences of their actions. Other characters meeting up with other characters. Overall, what were your thoughts on this episode, Pat? Especially since Sapochnik is a guy who had such a tremendous role, not just on the show, but on the entire Game of Thrones verse. So much so that he's one of the co-showrunners for the upcoming House of the Dragon.
Yeah, I think this episode had some decent moments, and it really this season feels like a lot of setup. Like it's just kind of like episode after episode after episode of the characters moving, slowly to their destinations of where their storylines are going to pay off. And this episode is no different. I feel like there's not any real big things that happen. Like maybe not to minimize, Aemon dying or basically Sam and Gilly, basically consummating their relationship, and there's things that happen, but it's not up to the scale of like the crap moments that we're sort of looking for, forward to in this series. So I think maybe the audience expectation is like high, and like things like Hardhome really, fulfill that need. And then episodes like this, have good moments, solid moments that kind of keep you watching. But we're still waiting for the big bang for our buck type of stuff, and it's not necessarily delivered here in this episode.
Yeah, the way that I can best describe this episode is that it's an episode where 1 minute something is awesome is happening, and then the next minute something really fucking stupid is happening, which I guess you could say is like, kind of like the base descriptor for like a majority of the episodes that we've gotten this season. But this episode was particularly not infuriating, definitely not as infuriating as the last couple, but it is definitely an episode where you have Meister Aemon famously dies in this episode. It's really tragic. It's a really heartbreaking scene. You have
that's a fantastic scene.
It's like scene.
So the writing kind of comes and goes, right?
Yeah.
Master Aemon, he's talking about egg, and he's like, it's like, what is he talking about? And Sam is able to basically devise that it's Aegon Targaryen, and he's basically looking at young Sam here and remembering the past, when Aegon was a child and he called him Egg, and it's like you get this depth to this character that you just really would never expect, right? He's sort of the old man at Castle Black, and we know he's a Targaryen and he took the oath, but there's sort of only a surface level amount of characterization until all of a sudden they just like go deep with the character, and they do this kind of several times throughout the series, but this is the final moment, and they really kind of give you a little more layers to who he is, and the fact that he's has a past before the wall, and it's really touching. But does it really actually amount to anything? It just
right, because then the next scene we get Sam lighting the funeral pyre. Sir Alistair saying you're losing all your friends, Tarly, and then Gilly almost getting set upon by a couple just random Night's Watch guys who are trying to rape her. And it's like great, as if the ending of the last episode wasn't bad enough.
So we spend a lot of time on Aemon, basically dying and developing this character and everything, and it's basically just to serve that, like, he was a great character, a great actor, great everything for the show. It's like a good send-off for this character, but at the end of the day, it's basically just so Alistair can lean over and be like, all the friends are dying. It's to set up the end of the season.
It's worse than that, because you obviously have Jon leaving with Tormund in this episode. Again, it's a surprisingly good opening scene too, where it's just like, it's only there to set up for Hardhome. They're leaving. I like the moment where when Dolores unlocks Tormund and Tormund just looks over at Sir Alistair and he just raises his hands. I thought that was pretty great. In a reference to him almost beating the shit out of him in the fight, obviously in the battle last season, but. This entire Sam sequence that we're seeing at the wall, I feel like this is the episode where it's like, okay, we need stuff to set up for Hardhome. We can't just do Hardhome yet. And they really only had like 3 moments in this entire episode. They had it's Cersei getting arrested by the Sparrows. It was what's it called? Tyrion being revealed to Daenerys, and it was the Winterfell stuff with Ramsay, and it felt like they needed to write stuff in between and for the scenes to happen. And so they come up with this entire cockamamie like Sam arc for the plot in order to motivate him to bring Gilly south what's it called, in order to essentially get Sam's arc from A Feast for Crows jump started a whole season after it's supposed to happen, in order to get Gilly south of the wall. And it's so that whole scene with the Night's Watch brothers was terrible when I watched it the first time. It was terrible when I watched it the second time. It was even worse when I watched it the third time. And now here it's one of those scenes that just gets dumber and dumber every single time I watch it.
It feels the need for the first time watcher, sets up a lot of stuff. It really brings them to, they're a couple, and that's not going to change. Like, this is kind of a lifelong unspoken marriage at this point, because clearly they didn't get some sort of religious figure to bond the relationship,
right?
But for the most part, they're going to consummate it because they are connected souls, and I think there's something cool with how deep that story is going, and just their relationship and what Sam's willing to do. Like, Sam stepping up and being like, I fought a White Walker, and hey, I might lose to you, but I'm not afraid anymore. So, like, just to see where Sam started when he was introduced all the way up to this moment where, he's being beaten up by three guys and he's able to still stand, still fight for what he believes in. He's going to fight to the death, or till he wins. Maybe some sort of thing would have happened where he would have won that fight without Ghost. But, obviously it really helps that, a direwolf comes in and saves the day, so to speak.
Yeah.
Because
I want to call it Deus Ex. I feel like we should rename the Deus Ex Machina trope to Deus Ex Direwolf after that.
Yeah,
scene.
sure. But
and he literally notice how he literally just disappears after it. Like he's done, like gone.
Yeah,
it's almost like he's never there.
Yeah,
no growling or anything. It's hilarious.
Yeah, well, of course, it's one of those things where a ghost just kind of pops up when they need him.
Yeah.
But I think the cool thing is, with the direwolves, they kind of have disappeared from the show as because they've been murdered throughout the series. But it's kind of like an afterthought. They're kind of just there. But like I thought it was cool to see that the connection between Jon and Ghost, and then Jon and Sam, and whoever's connected to Jon. Ghost, knows him well enough to read who are his allies. I think that's pretty cool to sort of see that in the animal character. And, although it doesn't really get developed or pushed, too much in the series, it doesn't come to the forefront very often. It is kind of a cool thing to have in the series. But I don't know what else there is to say here, because it sets up Hardhome, sets up Sam's, trip to become a maester. And that's really it. It's there's a lot of things that are happening. I guess it sets up the end moment because, Aemon dies, and, the allies amongst the, basically the Night's Watch are dwindling. So it really does set the stage for like when the finale happens, like, it makes it possible.
Right.
So there's a lot going on here in terms of setup. But in terms of the episode, if we were just kind of to focus on it, it's like very short, very sweet, some pretty decent writing, but we're moving on to the next storyline.
Yeah, 100%. And as our way. So yeah, let's tackle the North. Winterfell we get Winterfell, and we get a scene with Stannis real quick. We check in with Sansa after that frankly awful rape scene that happened at the end of last episode, and this just proves, wow, so not only is Theon literally dickless now he's spineless too, because in addition to obviously again this is all set up for when he eventually does help Sansa at the end, and this is kind of like the what's it called, the flick of the switch that he needs in order to kind of kickstart his redemption arc after all the tragedy that he has both inflicted and has been inflicted upon him. Theon, I really do think, is one of the more underrated arcs of the show, but unfortunately Sansa asked him to do one little thing, which is bring the candle to the top of the tower, and nope, what does he do? He goes straight to Ramsay and tells her, and Ramsay, quite viciously. I love how too it's like, yeah, this one is so brutal. We can't show it because what's it called? Showing a male soldier last season flayed is one thing, but showing an old woman flayed, we can't show that. But I do have the one shot where they kind of show her hanging in the background when Theon's there, where and I love how too Sansa's trying to once again attempt to provoke Ramsay, I should say, with what's it called? With with the tactics that she used against Joffrey at one point, where it's like, oh, but you're a bastard. You'll never, what if your father has a son? And he's like, that's okay. He's like, I'm still the true heir. I'm still legitimized. And then he's like, yeah, but you're a bastard. You'll never be like kind of seen as whole in the eyes of everyone. And then he's like, oh, well, last I checked, your brother also. It's more ham-fisted setup for Battle of the Bastards. And the thing that sucks too is we don't get the Theon reveal scene of Theon telling Sansa that he didn't actually kill Bran and Rickon. So it's good. It's better. It's slightly better than last week. Like I said, it's them like actually kind of like showing what Ramsay's capable of. And it's like, this is kind of like effectively like how the story should have gone. Unlike, the weirdness of the last couple of episodes, the Brian Cogman written episodes. But what's it called? The idea of gifts and gift giving of this episode is one that has kind of been lost on me the last couple times that I've watched it, because this is the episode that I also remember there being a lot of moments where there's stuff that happens and I wasn't really sure what they were talking about because it wasn't clearly presented and it was kind of confusing. I'll touch on that more when we get into King's Landing. But yeah, the biggest takeaway here is just the fact that it's like, yeah, Theon is still spineless and still so scared of Ramsay that he's gonna rat on Sansa, and that's essentially, and then they're gonna talk about and then it's just more foreshadowing for the upcoming fight with Stannis' army. And then we check in with Stannis real quick, and this is once again another setup scene where he's just talking, where Davos is kind of recounting. It's like, yeah, we're stuck in the middle of the snow, we're losing horses. The sellswords, we get a little name drop with the Stormcrows. They rode off in the night, and then Melisandre, of course, comes up. I always love how like she always is like off in the corner, just waiting to like pop into something and be like, "Hey, can I sacrifice someone now?" She's like a petulant toddler. I feel like they're just waiting off to the side, and it's just like, "Hey, can I do this now? Hey, can I do this now? Hey, can I do this now?" I feel like that's like what her characters kind of become, and it once again demonstrates that it's like, yeah, Stannis is completely steadfast in his motivations, in what he will do, and he even says it. He's like, "Look, if I, what's it called? He's like, if I." Retreat now, then then the world will forever view me as the king who retreated. And I'll just say right there, I don't necessarily know if that's the case. Probably should have listened to Davos as far as that goes, but I don't know. What's your take on that?
Listen, the whole North Winterfell thing, I'm going to have to unpack it from the very beginning. So, it basically, you're coming in strong here, reminding the audience that Theon has been mutilated, for sure. Not, beyond the fact that he's had a mental break and he can no longer really function in society and in the world. I think that's one of the things is like, he is broken and therefore his mental state is really questionable at this point. And when Sansa reaches out, one of the things that is very interesting in the scene is Theon kind of walks with the tray and puts it down. He gets a key and he has to unlock the door, and then he opens the door and he comes in and puts the tray down, and he's got to lock the door again. It makes it clear that Sansa's a prisoner. She's basically staying inside her bedroom the entire day, and then Ramsay comes in, and basically does the same thing every night that we seen at the end of the last episode. So essentially, she is a prisoner in Winterfell. She's unable to really roam around the castle. Reek coming in and dropping off a meal, maybe once, twice, maybe she gets 3 squares. Who knows? They didn't really set that up, but the fact is she is a prisoner in Winterfell, and now is the time for her to light the candle like she was advised to do earlier on by this person. And, she doesn't really question whether Theon is crazy or broken or whatever, just accepts that, hey, he's Theon, he's going to help me out. Which, seems to be a little bit of a glaring mistake on her end. But, hey, listen, she asks him, and then the whole thing, like you said, Ramsay is told, and it leads to the flaying of the woman. It's one of those things where, I don't know about story development here. It kind of happens. It takes place again. It shows that Ramsay really has his, foot to her throat, so to speak. And that Sansa's situation is pretty dire. So they do nothing, in my opinion, to show us that Sansa's any closer to being rescued or getting a handle on this situation. It's really just sort of putting her in an even more dire place than she was before. In terms of Stannis and Melisandre, like again, it's quick, it's sweet, it sets up the whole sacrifice storyline. We clearly don't want it to happen. We know that Stannis has to make a big decision here. Does he continue with the Lord of Light, or does he just really rely on his experience as a battle commander? And the question is, or the question gets resolved, obviously in the episodes to come. But it's one of those things where we're just now setting up this like horrific scene that's going to happen, and I think it's pretty straightforward. It's short, sweet, straightforward. And I don't know about you, but like I'm not looking forward to that scene because
not one bit.
You know what I mean? Like we see these scenes earlier in the season where he's talking about, you're my daughter, like I did everything to get rid of the
grayscale,
the grayscale and everything. So now he's presented with this choice, and I think in the series, in retrospect, and we'll see when we get to the moment, it seems like he just decides like, yeah, sacrifices worked before, so why not? And I think that's one of those things where the tragedy of the storyline is really expedited, and I don't know if it lands as well as it does. The scene is gruesome, and it really does hit the emotional heartstrings, but it kind of comes up on you, really fast.
Yeah, indeed it does. Yeah. So then we get to King's Landing. So after the whole mock, it mostly, ironically enough, this is more so a fallout rather than a setup. Where you have kind of the fallout from the mock trial, more so like the establishment of more the High Sparrow as more of a kind of a gatherer, a Karl Marxist figure, where you have him like gathering the masses in order to bring down all. He's like, okay, now we're gonna bring down all of the elite, we're gonna punish all the elite, and kind of reveal a little bit more of his motivations there. Biggest thing for me here is kind of it's a double-edged sword, because on the one hand, you have him where he's now kind of revealing his motivation of, it's like, okay, so we are the many, you are the few, what happens when the many stop obeying the few, and all of that, the whole kind of inverting the the house metaphor, if you will, that he makes multiple times. But he's still kind of like Cersei's Cersei's weapon of choice, if you will, which again just shows a clear lack of judgment on her part as well.
Yeah,
But
it's really annoying that she didn't put any checks and balances on the High
crazy, right?
Sparrow. Yeah, because it's not like he just came up with these beliefs, in the past like 6 months. He's had them lifelong, or at least for years, decades even. And the fact is, Cersei didn't do any due diligence in terms of who she was empowering. And you're right. Like when Olenna comes in, is like, what, name your price? What's going to happen here? I want Marjorie and Loras back, and you have to basically have some sort of bargaining. And High Sparrow basically now reveals to us, the audience, and to Olenna, that yeah, it's basically the masses need to kind of strip you of your riches and your pride, and really just put you on our level. And when the masses, like you say, stop obeying and really start thinking about it and bring you down to their level, that's when true change can happen. And so, it's that setup, I think, is really solid in terms of, just like fleshing out who the High Sparrow is and what his cause is. At the same time, I definitely question, like, if Tywin understood this, then how did Cersei sort of overlook this?
Right. It's once again showing like flaws in Cersei's logic. Cersei is not nearly as smart as she thinks she is. But it's funny because this is, I feel like, the biggest takeaway that I had from this episode. More so, I guess just the reason why I'm like kind of so short of things to say is because this is the first episode after it seems like so many where it's actually like, okay, it's actually giving me some stuff to look forward to again. And for the longest time, I had no idea who Littlefinger was talking about in the scene with him in the brothel with Olenna, where they're kind of, recapping their plan and everything. And she's trying to hold him to task. And I never realized that it was Lancel who he was talking about in that scene. I swear to God, Pat, I've seen that scene over and over and over again. When Littlefinger is like, as it happens, I do also have a bit of advice, a gift as well, a handsome young lad. And I had no idea who he's talking about. I'm like, who the hell is he talking about? And it turns out that Littlefinger, in an attempt to appease Olenna and honor kind of, their former alliance that they had, his way of doing that was by having Lancel tell the High Sparrow about Cersei's previous misdeeds in order to have her removed from her position. And then that brings up a couple of logic flaws, which is like, okay, so if the High Sparrow is vehemently against all the elites because he rightfully so assumes that, they all have dirt in their closet that is just overlooked because of their wealth and status, why would he have not thought to suspect Cersei earlier? That's number one. And number two, if he was on this grand crusade to begin with, why in the hell would he not have taken her down as soon as she gave him, the inkling, the power, and restored the faith militant? So that exposes a couple of logic flaws there. But that was just one thing that I completely just never realized what he was talking about for the longest time.
Yeah, so I would say that's where this storyline gets really muddy because, I don't think the High Sparrow himself should really, get this power. Like he seems to just take it. Right. Without any assistance, and he's able to put basically the Tyrells and Cersei, basically dragged them down without any opposition. And I think this goes to a point I made in earlier episodes, was that there should be someone, in the King's Guard that is, against Cersei, that sort of is betraying her, or whatever the case may be. There are a certain amount of people in King's Landing that decide to side with the High Sparrow, and that is really what empowers him. To me, that's what would make sense, right? Because yes, he's seizing power, and he's doing these things of trying to bring the elites down to the level of the people, and punish them for their crimes, in terms of the religious crimes. But there's really no one assisting him. He's not playing the Game of Thrones, although his game would be slightly different, but like, that's, to me, what's missing here in this storyline is, everyone's supposed to be playing the Game of Thrones, but the High Sparrow is doing his own thing and suddenly seizing power without any opposition. And, maybe he doesn't necessarily want to sit on the throne, but the fact is he wants to punish people that do. And you would think that, in this world that we've created, he would actually have to play the game to a certain degree, and that he would have to have allies, have to have enemies, and he would have to basically, pull the strings a lot harder than what he's doing in these episodes. So, I think one of those things is like, it's just going to give him this unlimited power, and that's something that doesn't sit right with me in terms of storytelling. I like what you're saying about Littlefinger kind of cluing them into Lancel, and that's what leads to, Cersei's arrest here. It's very subtle. It's very, like you say, it's just kind of a line of dialogue. I don't think there's a direct connection between those two things. So to me, it's not on the screen. I don't really, I understand what you're saying, and it kind of seems like what your take on it is true, but it's very easy to overlook this, as you said. And, I think that's one of the things that is, proves my point, that this storyline is not,
just the biggest
really clear. It's not really,
Right.
Showing us how the High Sparrow is playing the game.
Well, the biggest source of confusion for me comes from the fact that Lancel was brought back very deliberately at the beginning of this season in order to set up for this. Like, this is always where they were going to go. So if that was the case, and he confessed and, full of sin and all that, wouldn't the High Sparrow have already known all this when Cersei first approached him? Because you got to assume that Lancel didn't just kind of, confess all this just like recently to him. You have to assume that if he wanted to like clean himself of his sins, that he would have done it like when he first met him. And another thing on top of that too is, I feel like I'm turning into that guy now, but hey, it's official. The books did it better. But in the books, it was an issue of Cersei was having sex with multiple different men that that she had protecting her, and was trying to set up Marjorie that way, and it ended up backfiring on her because one of the men who she turned over to the Faith Militant for questioning in order to like appease them, one of the men ended up ratting her out. That's what ended up happening. And so you didn't really have the setup with Lancel. Lancel, I don't even think was in the city when when this happened, So at the least there, it's like, okay, it happens more so in real time rather than this being like a long drawn out plot. But here it's like, oh, so Littlefinger as a result of, and another thing too, also, if this is Olenna getting some payback against Cersei for what she's done, I mean, fat fucking chance of that happening, because guess what? The only thing that comes of it is Cersei getting imprisoned. But like the Sparrows still effectively have control over the city, because then they just end up like, kind of bringing Marjorie and then later on, by proxy, Tommen into their camp. So it's like, when they bring in the army. So it's like at that point, it's like, why not just, after that encounter with the High Sparrow, why not just bring in the army in order to overtake things? It's like, well,
yeah.
The Lannisters are still allies, why I can't imagine that they're going to, turn them away or try to assist the Faith Militant in any way,
Yeah, I feel like we've gone back into that fantasy storybooking here. It's what I would have done here is set up at the beginning of the season, like Lancel's coming in, he's like brutally like murdering these people that are of sin, and then show the High Sparrow be like, Lancel, like you're bashing people's heads in, like that's not the way, like
right.
like, have the High Sparrow say like, yes, we want to punish them, but we have to punish them through, the religious tenets. Violence begets violence. Like, have some little mentorship happening between the High Sparrow and Lancel, and have Lancel be like a troubled youth. He's turning to violence, and he's really even a little more extreme than the High Sparrow is, and maybe it's a sense of the High Sparrow might not be able to control his own extremist people, and have that be a little bit of tension throughout this whole entire season, because at the end of the day, when it comes to this scene and you have Littlefinger sort of hand over the name of Lancel, the High Sparrow, you could have this cool scene where he approaches him and be like, hey, listen, Lancel, like, don't you have something to say to me? Don't and he can basically use his words to get Lancel to confess, which then leads to the surprise arrest of Cersei. And I think it's going to be a much stronger storyline because you're showing something unfold throughout the entire season, and you're allowing this sort of Littlefinger betrayal to be a big moment between the Tyrells and the Lannisters, and really, it's just overall there's a way to make this storyline stronger. It doesn't have to be my fantasy booking here, but the fact
I don't
is,
know. I'd much rather watch the version of the show that your fantasy booking is rather than what
yeah,
we
I'm
got.
just saying they could have spent more time developing this, and it could be any just a little more layers to the story, a little more depth, and I think we're there. I don't mind the High Sparrow. I don't mind the extremists in taking over King's Landing. I don't really mind those things. It's just you have to go a little bit more, deeper to figure this story out. It's too streamlined. It's too, we're just taking it on faith here, to bring up the religious term. It's just we don't get enough, and I think that's what undermines the story.
Yeah, I agree 100%. And two other moments that I just wanted to bring up before we left this storyline behind. We get what Lena Headey's acting in the scene with her and Tommen, I think, is unbelievable. It's fantastic. The scene where she is what's it called, where Tommen is started to channel a little bit of his inner Joffrey there and started to complain about his own ineffectiveness. I thought that was great. And so Lena Headey's acting there as far as the presentation of, yeah, this is what kind of a reminder of who Cersei is doing this all to. She is doing this all for her children. That is literally her entire motivating factor. She has constructed this giant sort of like fortress in order to protect her and her children from the forces that would harm them. And in this case, in this case, as she's perceived at the beginning of the season, she perceives in Marjorie as a threat, considering that, all of this seems to have stemmed from some misguided notion that Marjorie is attempting to take him away from her, which was true in a political sense, but I feel like she was taking that more personally than she probably should have. And that comes back to bite her because she ends up getting a taste of her own medicine and thrown in jail. And also from the Ted Lasso insert, it's crazy. Now every time I go back and watch that and I see Septa Unella, Cersei's favorite Septa, who ends up inflicting her torture, I'm going to be like, oh yeah, Rebecca from Ted Lasso. It's still kind of crazy to me. But
I will say, again, I agree. Like, the acting in this entire storyline, like, there's moments of brilliance there, and I think they do their job in terms of what they've been asked to do. The story depth is the only thing missing, and yeah, I'm really surprised. Like, yes, I forgot who is the actor's name.
So the actress's name is Hannah Waddingham. She portrays Rebecca in Ted Lasso.
Yeah,
and
I haven't seen Ted Lasso yet, and I do think she does a great role here in this show. But it amazes me how many articles pop up on my phone and say like famous Game of Thrones actor does well in Ted Lasso. Because listen, like,
I've seen those too.
Yeah, it's weird. It's weird to me because yes, does a great job in this character, but this character is such a side character that it's not like you're given a spotlight. And I think the work, and you can correct me if I'm wrong, but Ted Lasso is the breakout role.
Yeah, 100%.
And that's what's making her a star.
Matt, come on,
and
you
I
should know better than to fall for clickbait articles like that.
Yeah,
come on,
no,
man.
it's 100%. It has to be clickbait because and it's sad to see someone undermined for something that's a breakout role, such as the Ted Lasso thing. And I haven't seen it. But it's clear that that's where they're being successful. And I get it. It's like tying your name to Game of Thrones. It's awesome that you were there. You played an awesome role, but let's not undercut the work that you're doing day in, day out. And that, I guess this is just me complaining about the internet
About clickbait articles,
articles.
to which I don't
how
blame
it
you one
works.
bit. I hate
It's
those things. Those
like
things are so
you
stupid.
gotta applaud actors for the work that is amazing.
Hell, you probably wouldn't
And I
even
think
know
Ted
that.
Lasso is what it is.
You probably wouldn't even know that her name was Septa Unella if you weren't paying super close attention and heard it like the one time the High Septon says her name, or if you were an avid book geek like me and haven't read those things like so many times. That's the only way you would know her name. But yeah, it's just one of those funny things in hindsight of like a bit part player that that blows up later on.
Yeah, I'm gonna have to check out Ted Lasso.
I'm telling. I think you would like it. The biggest thing
and
for me about that show is the fact that it's kind of pitched as like a goofy comedy in the line of Scrubs or what's it called, or Parks and Rec or something like that, because it's Bill Lawrence doing it, who obviously started off as a writer on Friends and then co-executive produced Spin City and Scrubs and stuff like that. But it ends up being like a lot more heartfelt, a lot more emotionally engaging, and it ends up kind of more so executing itself more like a sports drama, and just it's feel good TV, but without like kind of like the emotionally manipulative elements. And Sudeikis is unbelievable. I still can't believe that he took a fucking SNL sketch character and turned that into like one of the most endearing characters yet. So
we'll see. I guess I'll have to if I find the time, dip in.
That's my 5 seconds on. Yeah, that's my 5 seconds on Ted Lasso, and hopefully we can spend no more than 5 seconds on the Dorne stuff, because oh man, this is just getting stupid. I mean, it was already kind of dumb to begin with, but this is just getting really stupid.
Yeah, I don't really know what happens here.
What
like, okay, Jamie and Marcella have a good great dialogue. Marcella's like, you don't even know me. Cersei sent me away.
Teenage girl rant, but it makes
100%.
Yeah, but you get where she's coming from, because she's like, I did my duty, I was sent away, and now I'm here. Now you want to bring me back? It's like from her stance, I completely understand why. As that of a youth not really understanding the higher game that's being played here, and Jamie still has to play that double-edged role of where he's like, he is the concerned father, but he can't make it seem like he's the concerned father, or more so just like an envoy carrier of Cersei's deeds. And there's not really anything. It would have been one thing if there was like some payoff from that scene that came, but it's kind of left feeling a little unresolved. And then we have to cut to this stupidity that happens with Bronn and the Sand Sticks.
Listen.
Like, what the hell was that? I'm sorry. Like,
I don't know what to say about it, because
it's baffled. It baffled me the first time I saw it, and every time I watch it since, I'm like, really? Is I'm like, people didn't realize then with sequences like this that what was happening to the show. They didn't realize it that early, because I saw that. I just remember being like, what the hell is this? What is going on here?
Well, Bronn starts off singing a
song. The thing that I'm convinced of is just more of an excuse for Jerome Flynn to demonstrate his amazing singing chops. Like, he is a very, very talented singer, singer-songwriter when he's not playing Bronn on Game of Thrones. And then you have the Sands, and then he starts getting into a casual conversation with them about women. And then the one Sand Snake is like, oh, am I the most beautiful woman you've ever seen? And I feel like the only thing that I can come up with is somehow in their twisted minds, Benioff and Weiss thought it was like, okay, what's never been done before? Pat, it's a genius idea, as me being Benioff to Weiss. What's never been done before? The idea of we're running out of things to do with scantily clad women on the show. So what we're going to do? We're going to use them to, we're going to use the idea and symbolically represented of naked women's bodies being being poison. Because right when he starts staring at her body, the slow-acting poison that's on all their daggers and stuff is going to start infecting him. Genius, right? And it's just the results speak for themselves.
This is like a poor version of the movie Crank, where you have to get the adrenaline running in your heart, and that whatever. It's like the opposite, right? It's like if you get the adrenaline going in someone and they had the poison, it's going to start killing them. And I don't know. It's very confusing. Yes, it's all about Bronn sort of being seduced by one of the Sand Snakes, and there's some sort of chemistry between the two of them, and she gives the antidote, and his life is saved. It really just
what it is? It's like, how is it that this was the payoff that they constructed from the whole Bronn saying the Dornish women are crazy bit from a couple episodes ago, and more on that, how is it that we end up spending more time with this than we do with the reason why we're here in the first place, which is Jaime and Myrcella. You know, like everything that happens with Bronn, I feel like ends up taking up more screen time than everything with Jaime and Myrcella.
I think the only purpose of this storyline is to set up the poison and the antidote, and set up Myrcella's death by the poison. And then obviously I think maybe there was a little more plan between Bronn and the Sand Snakes that was going to develop into like maybe a bigger storyline, or they wanted to keep that door open by having such a long conversation between the two, because Bronn technically owes his life for getting the antidote. So maybe in season 6 this could have led to a storyline where Bronn has to work together with the Sand Snakes, but we obviously know Dorne gets swept under the rug. It's one of those things where, like, in the context of the entire show and understanding where the show finishes, on repeat watches, this scene definitely doesn't really have much to offer. It just really sets up the poison so that Myrcella gets killed, and that's it. That's really all it does. It's not like it's well acted. It's put together.
Not, yeah.
It's like the actors kind of did their best with the material they were given.
Well acted from one half. The other half, I'm not.
No, I would say that they with the material they were given, they got the scene done, and that's the only thing I have to say really about this sequence.
It's pretty much all you can say about that sequence entirely. And then we wrap it up in Meereen. You have one quick scene with Daenerys and Daario in bed, and he's telling her to kill all the masters, which again is those words are sounding more and more and more wise as these episodes continue to go on, because he's just like, hey, you know what you should do? You should line up the masters and kill them. Since he's like, well, the Sons of the Harpy attack seem to have stopped since my marriage pact to Hizdahr, and he's just like, yeah, or maybe because he's one of the ringleaders of the Sons of the Harpy. Again, continuing to emphasize this mystery that should be kind of cool and thrilling, but then ultimately is never paid off. And then you get one cool sequence. I have some pretty funny sequence where where Adebisi is selling what's it called? Is selling off Jorah and Tyrion, and Jorah is bought by the slaver, and then Tyrion demonstrates his lot by saying by knocking down the one guy and beating him up with the chain. I thought that was pretty good. And then he tries talking to the slaver and gets bashed in the face. And then you have the ending scene, obviously, which is where the whole title of the episode comes, where Jorah sees that Daenerys is there at the fighting pits viewing the fighters. Some great action, some great kills, by the way. I love the look.
I like how Jorah just busts out and
busts out and takes them all out. And I love how too he pulls a Batman where he specifically goes out of his way to not kill any of them. It's hilarious.
Yeah, you think that's why he got the role in the DC show Titans?
Hey, who knows? Maybe. I never put that two together. You know what's crazy? Wasn't that after like the one episode where it's like Nightwing or Robin, whatever, where he was like hallucinating about like Batman killing everyone?
That was the end of the first season. It kind of introduces him as Bruce Wayne, and then he plays that role throughout the series whenever they have Bruce Wayne kind of come in.
Right.
I think he. I hate to interrupt here. I guess Game of Thrones is a Warner Media property, so we can talk about Batman.
Yeah, we can talk about other stuff on there.
But I think he's one of my favorite Batmans.
Really?
Which is, yeah, really? I think he does a great job. He's suave. He's got the, he just got the chop. I guess it's because he's minimally used in the Titan show, and he just pulls it off. He kind of, plays a good Bruce Wayne kind of breaking down. And he just does a good job. They don't overuse him. They don't really focus on him. And I think that's why he's able to pull it off. So I don't really mind him as a TV Batman. I think he's actually pretty good. If you haven't seen the Titan show, and you're interested in seeing what Jorah's role is after Game of Thrones, like, check it out.
All right. But here's the biggest pet peeve that I have from this. So obviously, again, we know that logistically this can't happen because otherwise we can't have a show. We won't have a show otherwise. But first of all, why does that guy just let Tyrion go when he's trying to escape? He has no idea what's going to happen there. So that was just confusing, and he just nods to him like he knows what he's going to do or something. That was confusing. And then,
well, I think it just comes down to like there's a bunch of chaos. And that guy himself must be a slave, so he just
it
chops
didn't look
him free.
like it. Why would he have a blade if he's a slave?
Well, they're in the fighting pits, right? So
yeah, but it's like he looked more like a guard than a slave, I guess.
Yeah, anything's possible. Like they don't really explain it, so I can see where, obviously we're not going to get a clear answer on this. But at some point, it's like you have the master who's paying everybody, and we know, from the beginning scene when they're bought, like, hey, here's a coin, that's your salary for the rest of your life. So like clearly they're not getting paid that much. So even though they're not showing us and it's not clear, it's not clarified in any way, I could totally just jump in there and say, well, the guy's underpaid and why not? He just let Tyrion free. Is it the best crafted scene? Maybe not, but it's
Could be
just
better.
whatever.
He's the other
someone in the same boat that's trying to help Tyrion out.
The other nitpick that I have, so Daenerys specifically said that if she ever saw Jorah again, she would kill him. She sees Jorah again. She doesn't immediately kill him. She instead says, get him out of my sight. And then the minute that Tyrion walks out and introduces himself, she has said vehemently beforehand that it's like, okay, all of the usurpers' dogs, Lannister, Stark, Tyrell, Baratheon, all of them, they all participated in the hunting of her brother. I remember this is a passage from the book that she was saying to Sir Barristan, where she's like, where Sir Barristan was trying to like say that like, oh, some of the houses are better than the others. And she's like, when a dog is setting upon, a person, is like, does the person differentiate between which dog is better? She's like, no, they're all the same. So I'm like, if that's the case, and she obviously knows, the role that the Lannisters played in the destruction and downfall of her house, why does she not cut Tyrion's head off like immediately? Why is she waiting to hear them out? That was really like the biggest like sort of logic gap that I had with it after that one sequence, and obviously, like I said, logistically it can't happen because then we wouldn't have a show. But it's just given that like this, I'm like, the show has already like done leaps and bounds of like leaping ahead of logic. I'm like, so this is just one of the things where it's like, now she's just breaking her own rules nonstop, and we know that that's what characters in TV shows do. They break their own rules nonstop. Just look at Mike in Breaking Bad. He gives Walt the famous no more half measure speech at the end of season 3, and then just proceeds to take half measures on literally every single thing going forward. So hey, TV characters breaking their own rules is just kind of a mantra that we live by.
I will say this is like, she didn't expect Jorah to go out there and find someone from Westeros, and she's, I guess, willing to hear him out at this point. Obviously, we're going to see this in the next episodes. But I think the main thing is, she is trying to be a, ruler that thinks about logistics and strategizes. And, it's one of those things where like this could be an opportunity. So I think, even though in the end of the storyline, it could very easily have been like, let's execute them both. I think, as a ruler, she has to take a moment to at least hear out what's going on, see how this could be a benefit to her. And I think that's, pretty realistic that she would take this moment to do it. And, she has to listen to her advisors too, which at this point, I don't even really know who is advising her.
Yeah, right. Grey Worm is dead. Grey Worm's on his deathbed. It's pretty much just Dario and Missandei at this point.
Yeah, so I could see where, maybe a little of that plays into it. Obviously, in the show, they don't write that in there. But, it could be like, hey, he is back. I have taken a little bit of a loss in the advisory department. So it might be worth hearing them out because, even though Jorah did betray me, he still has my best interests in mind. And, it might be worth seeing if he's learned his lesson from, his time in banishment.
Yes, 100%. Well, we'll have to see all of that on next week's episode, which we finally got to. And next week, we will be indeed recapping the long-awaited episode, and quite frankly, the only thing that's really getting me through these last couple episodes, which is, of course, Hardhome. Thank you guys so much for joining us for yet another episode. Be sure to follow my co-host, Professor Pat, with everything he's got going on at Patrick W. Huber on Instagram. Be sure to follow myself at Movie Nerd Reviews across all platforms. Be sure to follow the official Talkin TV podcast across all social medias, Instagram, Facebook, Twitter. Be sure to subscribe to us on YouTube if you haven't already. Be sure to follow us on Twitch if you aren't already. And be sure to keep tuning in for new episodes that are uploaded on Spotify and Apple Podcasts every single Friday. We'll see you guys next week. 12 seasons in a short film, and watch more fucking movies. We'll see you guys next time.